Hello, everybody. My name is Michael Robertson Jr., and this is episode 5 of the Hallowed Horror Podcast. And of course, with me, I have my co host, Mr. Jason Collins.
Hello, everybody. Thank you for being here. So excited about tonight's podcast. How are you doing tonight?
I'm doing really well. Actually. I have a new addiction. I have recently started playing Animal Crossing on the Switch, and it has consumed almost all of my free time. I'm a little ashamed to admit that.
Oh, I hate it when that happens. It's easy to do, though, when you find a good game.
It is. And this is a game I didn't think I'd actually like. I bought it on a whim because everybody is basically staying at home. I was going to get to kill some time, and now it has essentially killed all of my time. So I may have a problem. Yeah. But
it's dangerous. It's dangerous. I'm purposely staying away from the new VR game for PlayStation, the Room VR that we've talked about. Right. I have not got it yet. I don't want to get involved in it. I got too much to do before I can get really emotionally invested in that game.
Right. My wife and I have been playing that. We've played about half of it. It is very good. So I'm glad that you have some willpower and I'm being the video game bum and doing nothing productive. So
I know where my faults are and I can't get started on one of those. Otherwise something has to fall off the bandwagon.
Well, other than that, this has been another interesting week. People are still staying at home, still quarantined. We're still working from home. Anything you'd like to add about that different than last week?
Not a thing. Other than it's just starting to level out for us. People are starting to get used to it. Though we did just extend our mandated stay home through June 10th, I think is what it was.
Yep, state of Virginia. The governor said stay at home till June 10th. So I think it's the right call, personally. But
yeah, I do too. It's definitely an adjustment for a lot of people.
Yeah, but the good news is we get to play video games and we get to watch a lot of movies that we might not normally get to watch, including tonight's film, which is, I love the title of this film, Satanic Panic.
Yeah, this was a really, really fun film, a horror comedy, I guess is what we would call it.
Yeah, that's what it was labeled. And ladies and gentlemen, Jason and I picked this movie on purpose for a number of reasons. The first one was we have done the first 4 episodes on films that are fairly well-known, bigger blockbuster hits, if not, a little older. And when we started this podcast, we definitely wanted to also cover a lot of the lower budget, indie, lesser known films. And Shudder and Netflix, they are 2 really good sources to find some of these movies. So we were ready to do one of those episodes. And at the same time, because of the pandemic in the world and everything, everybody's very serious right now and very worried. We thought we would do a lighter, more, comedic film. And this one was a new release on Shudder. It's a Shudder exclusive. The trailer looked very funny. It is labeled a horror comedy. After watching it, though, it was almost more of a silly film than it was like a laugh out loud comedy. There was not a lot of moments where I was laughing. It was more like a chuckle or a oh my gosh kind of moment.
Yeah, they were definitely making light of some typical horror stuff, but it definitely wasn't like satire like Scary Movie was. But right. It was definitely a really, really fun, just light horror. I mean, don't go in like, hardcore horror films. Don't go in there don't go into this film looking for something that's going to be scary and it's going to keep you up at night. This is not that film, but it was still a really, really fun movie. It was gory in like a fun kind of way,
like a splatterhouse kind of thing. Yeah, I mean, It was like a light splatterhouse. Just it was this movie was made clearly knowing it did not want to be taken seriously. This was made the way it was made for a reason.
Yeah, I would even say parts of it were like it was cute. It was like a cute horror movie.
Right. Yeah, there was a lot of stuff I really liked about this film that we'll get into, but it was written by Grady Hendrix, who I have never heard of. It was directed by Chelsea Stardust, who I have never heard of, and I am very much wondering if that is her real last name. And believe it or not, this movie stars Rebecca Romaine.
Yeah, and her husband.
Jerry O'Connell, yes. He makes a brief appearance and
a really great cameo. It was so fun.
Haley Griffith is Sam. She is the main heroine, if you will, and Ruby Modine, who the last name caused me to look this up, but she is Matthew Modine's daughter, and we are all probably most familiar with him recently as playing Papa in Stranger Things.
Ah, right.
The doctor.
Yep.
So this and Arden Mirren. Sorry, there's another.
I would say, don't forget Arden. She's the majority of the comic relief in this.
Right. Yeah. So it not a bad cast. It's a cast that when you look at this cast on paper and then you watch the film, you go, huh, that's interesting. You wouldn't have put those together.
No, it was
really
good. I think it was a great movie. Chelsea Stardust. I'm pretty sure I could not find anything that really nailed this down, but I'm pretty sure this was her directing debut of like a feature full-length film.
I noticed that she did have some IMDb credits, but I didn't dive. I only just kind of scrolled through to see if there's anything that jumped out at me that I recognized, and there wasn't. So I don't know, but interesting. And one thing that I really wanted to talk about, because I didn't, this struck me when I was watching the opening credits, was this film was brought to us by Fangoria. And I thought that was really interesting because if you don't know, if you're listening to this podcast, you probably do know, Fangoria magazine was a very popular horror magazine that started, it really boomed in the 80s and 90s. And I personally, I think I maybe got one copy of Fangoria ever in my life. I've heard Stephen King talk about it. I've heard Stephen King's son, Joe Hill, who's also a writer, talk about it in some of their interviews and some of the inspiration that they got from some of the stories and stuff that was in there. It eventually died off from a magazine perspective, as a lot of magazines did over the years. But that was in the 2016 range, and then it was purchased by a company in 2018, and they started doing quarterly magazines and branching out into film. So knowing Fangoria's history and now seeing this movie, I can see why the two matched up pretty well.
Yeah, I think it was a great merge, and I think it's an amazing direction that they're going in, and I really look forward to seeing more stuff produced by them.
Yeah, exactly. That's what had me excited. It's like, are there more out here already that Fangoria is producing? Because I want to see them. It's really pretty interesting. So, this movie's synopsis is pretty simple, as is the majority of the movie. I'll read this very briefly. This is from Shudder's page. Sam's first day as a pizza delivery driver is not going according to plan. At the end of a long day and not enough tips, her last delivery turns out to be for a group of Satanists looking for someone to sacrifice. Now in a fight for her life, Sam must fend off witches, evil spells, and demonic creatures, all while trying to keep her body and soul intact. And that sums up the entire movie perfectly.
I would agree. I think it's overall a really campy horror film.
Campy.
With sort of,
that's a
with
good
some
word for
ridiculous gore and some over-the-top satanic rituals. To be honest, after seeing the trailer, I was really really excited after the trailer. You sent me, I think, three or four trailers from Shudder, and as soon as I saw this one, I knew it was the one I wanted to do. It was, like you said, it was a little lighter. It had some comedy aspect to it. And honestly, just from the cover art, I was hooked because it has a very like 80s vibe to it, just really old school vibe to it. And I thought that was really, really well done. And that really translates into the movie too, I thought. And so I had pretty decent expectations of this movie going in. And I think the film really exceeded those expectations for me.
It's really good, and I'm looking forward to diving a little deeper into it with you. You talking about the I guess the movie poster, the art, the title art and stuff like that. I have been a Shudder subscriber. By the way, Shudder, if you're listening and would like to sponsor us, please reach out. I've been a Shudder fan for about a year and a half now. I originally signed up for it when there was a movie that I think it was Sundance. I can't remember exactly. It was called Terrified. It was a movie that was making a lot of waves as a very scary horror film that for some reason somehow got locked into being a Shudder exclusive. It was getting all these rave reviews and it was only on Shudder. So I signed up for Shudder, and you would think somebody that was as big a horror fan as me and who writes supernatural novels would have already been a Shudder subscriber. I wasn't. I signed up, and as soon as I got into the menu, and to this day now, whenever I launch the Shudder app and I see the movies listed, I feel so at home. Like, I love the look of them. Like you just said, the majority of them have that campy splatterhouse gory feel to them. And it's just amazing. Their selection is so good. I've watched not as many films on Shudder as I would like to, just because of time, but everything that I've watched on there, I've enjoyed to some degree. There's nothing that I've watched that I've just like, well, that was absolutely terrible. I wish I hadn't wasted my time. And some of them are short, and that's the beauty of like a service like Shudder that can kind of cater to some of these, indie, smaller production houses. Is some of these films, including this one, I think it was like 89 minutes. I think I watched one last year that was called The Witch in the Window that was maybe in the 70-minute range. Like, it's just art that's just telling their story and then they're done. There's no other thing they're trying to do, and I love it. So, anyway, unless you have anything else you'd like to say, let's take a quick break and then we will actually dive into the film.
All right, let's do it.
Okay, we're back. Let's talk about this film, this crazy, wild, cheesy, gory, awesome, weird movie.
So the first thing I want to bring up is the production value of this film. It was so well done. I mean, to be an independent film, it was really, really good. I thought the lighting was solid. The camera work was solid. The cinematography in general was really great. I thought I was just really impressed with the overall thing, with the overall vibe of the entire film. But it was really well done. I think the set pieces were great. The wardrobe was great. I was super impressed with it, with just simply the production value.
The gore alone, I thought was really, really well done. I mean, even the super cheesy part with the roasting pan heart thing that grew into this whatever monstrosity, that it almost looked like something from Alien, with the little, when she was sucking on her finger. I mean, it looks so neat. Just anytime somebody was killed in a gory fashion, obviously it wasn't real, but if you think like a Quentin Tarantino movie, when you see blood and guts in a Tarantino film, it's over the top, but it doesn't look cheesy. It doesn't look super fake. It's like that rare middle ground, and this is what that movie did for me too.
There were a few movies, back in the 80s and 90s that back then they relied on practical effects very heavily, and this one, the majority of this was practical effects, and it was really well done.
Yeah, I particularly liked the scene where she was pulling the intestines out of the guy on the couch and just plopping them into the ground where she was going to read them like tarot cards. So I thought, like,
so ridiculous.
But that was such a neat little, idea to read somebody's intestines as if it was like tea leaves. It's crazy. I mean, it was really clever. There were really some clever parts of this script. In fact, as a writer, I look at story a lot when I watch films, and this movie, it makes me smile and it makes me happy because they took horror tropes, they took cheesy stuff, which are known to work and have been done 1,000 times, and they just rolled it into their own story, and they mixed in just enough of their own unique portion of it to just completely make it seamless. Like, even though you've seen it before, you still enjoyed watching it, and I thought that was really, really good. There's some actually, for it to be so silly, there's a couple like pretty decent, heartwarming, like really, I don't want to say they're emotional, but they hit the right note at the right time in this film, and we'll talk about some of those. I want to talk about the beginning. You talk about camera work and some of the cinematography. In the very beginning, when you see a lot of they're driving down the street and looking at all these rich neighborhoods. Right from the beginning, it was a little shaky, and I was thinking to myself, what do they have, an iPhone on a dolly and they're driving down the street? Like, what's happening here? And then they switch into going into the house, and it becomes this first person point of view. And I instantly thought, oh, this is just like Halloween. Like this is
exactly.
Yeah, I mean,
That's
this
exactly what it was. As soon as I saw that too, that's what it reminded me of, that entire opening scene.
Yeah, and I was like, this is done. This is done intentionally now. Now I get it, and I thought that was so cool that they would just incorporate that first person point of view, for that opening kind of bashing murder. By the way, dude, what the hell? That dude fell down like 3 times trying to run out of that bedroom.
Such a horror trope. It was ridiculous. Yeah.
Slipping in his socks. But
so that leads me to the one thing I wanted to talk to you about that I mentioned before we started recording, and while this is a really well done movie, it was a great story for the most part. It was really fun. It had a very strong like B movie vibe to it, right? And I think it was done on purpose. I don't, a lot of the B movies, 20 years ago were B movies because the directing wasn't great, the acting wasn't great, but this one had all of the acting. It had the directing, it had the cinematography, but it had a very intentional B movie feel. And it's been bugging me thinking about it, because it's like, how do you think they pull off a B movie feeling on purpose?
I don't know. That's an interesting way to look at it. This movie reminded me of 2 different things. Talking about your B movie, there were parts of this movie, particularly when the satanic cult were gathered together, and some of the ways that they were interacting with each other, and some of the things that they did that were just kind of outlandish. That kind of reminded me of like a Mel Brooks, like Dracula Dead and Loving It, back in the day, with Liam Neeson, not Liam Neeson. What is his name? The guy, the funny guy. He was an Airplane. See, I'm a horror fan, not a comedy connoisseur.
Oh, the guy from the star from all the Airplane movies.
Yes,
I don't remember his name.
Somebody look it up on your phone while I'm talking. It kind of had that feel to it a little bit to me. This movie also 100% to me was the X-rated version of Hocus Pocus.
I can see that.
There was so many little things about this movie that I was like, I feel like I'm watching Hocus Pocus now that I'm an adult and they're doing adult things.
The guy we're talking about is Robert Hayes.
No, that is not who I'm talking about at all.
From Airplane?
Yes. Leslie Nielsen. Sorry. Leslie Nielsen is what I'm talking about.
Leslie Nielsen?
Yeah, he's the main guy. I promise you.
You got me scratching my head on that one. Leslie Nielsen, he was a guy from all the Naked Gun movies, wasn't he?
Yes, maybe that's what I'm talking about. I'm not talking about Airplane. I'm talking about Naked Gun.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay.
All
right. Now
this is a horror podcast, Jason. Damn it, get back to the horror.
So, really, what makes a lot of horror movies great is the amazing use of shadow and darkness, right?
Yeah.
This movie, there's none of that. Everything is really like openly lit. It's very like, flat lighting is the wrong word, but it was like there's a lot of light. There's no shadow play in this movie. And I think that's one of the things that really lended itself well to being like a fun kind of campy horror, was that they weren't trying to scare you outright. And I thought that was the first thing from my perspective as I was watching it and thinking, okay, this is a really great B movie. And that's a weird thing to say, right? But it really was. It's a really great B movie.
I would go so far to say as there's nothing actually scary about this movie. It is, they are dealing with scary things, and it is gory and violent, and there's, mischief to be had. But like from an audience perspective, it's not a scary movie. It is really a comedy or a slapstick version of a potentially dark and horror filled film.
Yeah, and you say it's sort of slapstick. It didn't hit me until the next day, but the Satanic Panic, the whole point of it, you think, okay, it's satanic and people are panicking because something's bad's happening, right? But it's really just the cult themselves panic on trying to find their virgin
right.
the whole time. It was literally the cult panicking the whole time, and I thought that was such a great turn on the title.
Yeah, the bickering amongst the satanic group is really, really funny, and I love the way that they just instantly like introduce us to them with no real reasoning, like trying to explain why this could even make sense when Sam, the delivery girl, delivers the pizzas, and she goes in to try to get her tips, and they're all standing around the living room like they're having some sort of like business meeting, like self-help, motivational, inspirational speech. And are you ready to do this? And are you ready
to take what you want?
Yeah, and like it's so like everybody's just so normal, and there's like, are you ready to commit your life to Satan? And Sam has no reaction. She's just concerned about getting a few bucks for gas for her Vespa to get the hell out of there. And like everybody's like, yes, hail Satan. And she's just there like, whatever, guys, I just need a few bucks. Like,
it's super weird.
Like it's just the most normal thing in the world. And that's the way this whole movie is. It's just all this weird stuff that's happening is just accepted. It's just normal. It's really, really funny.
And I thought Haley Griffith played an amazing role. I thought because her whole role was a character that was supposed to be, she derived of innocence. That's what they needed out of her. They needed a virgin to sacrifice, and she played the role so good. She was she was really charismatic the whole time, but she was like so innocent and pure. And just, when they asked her, are you a virgin? She's like, that's a very personal question, like, right. Okay, grab her, so she just, her delivery, the entire movie was really great. I thought she played an amazing role.
And they did a great job. I mean, they from a physicality standpoint, they did a great job because she's a very cute girl. Like she's a cute actress. And then of course, when they're trying to go after her and they're like ripping her clothes off, when Jerry O'Connell is ripping her clothes off because he's trying to help her. If you're no longer a virgin, they won't have to sacrifice you. Now she's walking around in this like tight shirt with her boobs popping out. And I think the daughter, the Rebecca Romaine's daughter in the film, she even says something like, boobs like that, you can't be a virgin, or something like that. So like they had this role really cast from both sides physically. Like it really fit really, really well. And the whole thing is just funny the way that she is so innocent, even as all this stuff is going on around her. Like, it's almost like she's just kind of almost aloof through it. Like, she's surviving and she's fighting, but she's like constantly, what the hell is going on here? Like, I don't understand any of this.
Yeah, she's so far from like a badass,
right.
Character. She's just getting through it all, and she's just, like you said, she's just aloof. And the other thing I'd like to point out is that some of the 80s, and 90s horror like B movies, they I don't know why they ever did that, but they relied so heavily on like nudity and stuff like that. Mm-hmm. And this film did not do that. You just mentioned that, he was ripping her clothes off and she was popping, but nothing was ever shown. It was all like very G-rated.
Oh, until the end when they had a massive satanic orgy.
Well, yeah, but that was still very, that was the first time that they showed anything, but it was still not.
I wish you guys could see the face Jason just made when he was trying to come up with the word to describe that scene. It looked very disgusted, actually. But
it was a weird scene.
Oh,
I wouldn't call it an orgy. But it was
took
weird.
Me completely by surprise. Everything up until this point had been a very similar tone, and then at the end, it was like everybody went on an acid trip and took their clothes off.
It was the weirdest thing, and their cult like tripled in size too, out of nowhere.
Right.
It was just like we'd been dealing with the same like 7 or 8 people the whole time.
Now there's 30 of them.
All of a sudden, there's like naked people just standing around.
Yeah.
Where did you come from?
Yeah. It was, again. Don't try to make any sense of this film, or you will be disappointed. Essentially, yes, Sam shows up in this rich neighborhood. She delivers the pizza. She stumbles upon a satanic cult. They find out she's a virgin. They try to sacrifice her, or hold her to be sacrificed. She escapes after inadvertently witnessing Jerry O'Connell shoot himself in the face as he's trying to threaten her, which was probably the funniest moment.
He shot himself in the neck, is what he did.
Yeah, exactly.
Shot himself in the neck, and then she reached in through his neck down into his chest to grab his heart.
Right.
It was the weirdest.
Not
he
Sam.
Was alive the whole time.
Yeah, not Sam, but Rebecca Romaine, the leader of this cult.
The leader of the cult, right? Yeah.
And I should also point out that they are going after Sam because Rebecca Romaine's, what was her name? Danica. She was the leader of the cult. Danica's daughter was supposed to be the sacrifice, but when she found out that she was going to be, she had sex with the first guy she could meet, and she was then off the table, and Rebecca Romaine.
And that was the whole opening scene.
Yes,
I
exactly.
didn't put that together until afterwards, but
Right.
yeah, that was the whole opening scene.
Danica then turns her daughter over to other people to basically be taken care of. You learn, which you assume means to be killed, which she would have been. And they have to go after Sam now. Sam escapes. She discovers the daughter. What was her name? Judy. And the rest of the film is basically Judy and Sam trying to outsmart and avoid the cult who are trying to come after them and kill them and sacrifice them. And there's just some wild, crazy things. I really, really liked the babysitter girl with the two boys. I loved that whole weird dynamic with her and the kids, and then the massive drill built strap-on thing that they were going to use to kill the daughter.
Oh shit! What did they call it?
I think they called it
the kill dildo, or
they had a couple different references to it, I think, and they were all just puns, basically.
The kildo is what the kildo. That's what she called it. But I thought they missed an opportunity for a drill dough maybe, but it was that was super weird, that whole scene. But yeah, that entire everything that was going on in that house was amazing. It was such a good, just kind of like breath of fresh air after what had happened with Jerry O'Connell.
Yeah,
she immediately goes to that house, and
you
then
didn't know what to expect.
Two weird young kids watching some like really violent movie, and then they show it in the trailer. But I thought it was the funniest part of the whole movie, where she reaches up and like he's tasing her, and she sits up and she just straight left hooks him.
Knocked this kid on the ground. Yeah.
It was the best part.
Yeah.
I love that so much. And she just knocks him out with a left hook, and then she's like, "I'm so sorry." It was so good.
And that goes back to the innocence, even in this time of crisis, she's fighting for her life. Basically, she punches a kid and then immediately apologizes. That whole house there with that crew, that was just such a fun scene, because it was one of those things where you did not know what was going to happen. Like, you couldn't predict exactly what you were going to see or who these people were, because at this point you didn't actually know that the entire neighborhood is just nothing but the satanic cult. You at first just think that these people are just having this powwow at Danica's house. So she runs away and she comes into the other house. And then at this scene, you realize, oh, this whole neighborhood is messed up. They're all in this together. And that's that's actually when it got really fun to me. The idea that the whole neighborhood is just satanic cultist was really, really cool. I like that a lot.
Yeah, just the wrong street to be on.
Right. Yeah. So there's some fun scene. There's some fun deaths there in that house, with the fighting with the giant drill bit dildo. And by the way, that was done in the season of American Horror Story, Hotel. There was a ghost, one of the villain creeper things in Hotel had the this massive like drill bit for a strap on. That was in American Horror Story. So not the first time I've seen that, which is a weird thing to say. You've seen it more than one place, but it's an effective plot device.
I'll say I watched that season. I don't remember that from
it was the
season.
very first episode with the guy that was from New Girl, that played Schmidt on New Girl. He was like one of the people that checked in the very beginning, and it got him. It was shocking then. It wasn't. I don't think it was quite as big as the one that was in this movie, but it was the same
like
idea.
4 feet long.
Yeah, and like 3 feet and girth as well. It was ridiculous. But yeah, so that was a fun scene. And again, this whole movie basically just turns into these two girls fighting for their lives. But the interesting thing is, Danica's daughter, who is now helping Sam, she is quote unquote like trained in the ways of the witches, warlocks, Satanists. So she actually knows how to fight against them. She's the one that has the ideas of how to protect them with, laying out the salt and, coming up with some of the ideas to trick them and to be able to get away for a little while, which I thought was really, really cool, because if it had just been the whole movie of these two girls that were normal running away, it would not have been, I don't think, quite as interesting. It would have just turned into a normal movie of tag, you're it kind of thing.
Right.
But was it in this house that they got attacked by the sheet, the hex cloak, which basically was what happened when they sent out the little heart that they ripped out of Jerry O'Connell. It found them at the house. Was it at that house or was it the next house?
It was at her house, at the daughter's house is where that happened.
Okay. So, well, the house where she found the daughter, you mean?
No. So it wasn't in that house. They escaped that house because remember she tried to call 911.
Right.
And they had somehow taken over the phones and they knew where she was.
Yeah, that was never explained, which was really weird. But they dialed 911 and the cultists picked up.
Trope. Yeah. Yeah. The cult's just sitting there waiting for a 911 call to be made.
Yeah.
So they went to that house. They escaped and they went to her house, the daughter's house.
See, I didn't know that was her house. I thought she lived with the mother. I just thought it was just another neighborhood person that they broke into their house. But
maybe I think they tried to explain part of like where that led to. Some of the pictures that they were showing confused me a little bit. So maybe I missed a few things, but they were definitely at a different house when they ended up laying down the salt everywhere.
Okay. Yeah. So there's a really kind of ridiculous scene that, where one of the girls is fighting this sheet that basically becomes possessed that the witches are calling a hex cloak, I believe. And that for some reason, something about that scene reminded me of Poltergeist. I don't know why.
It reminded me of all of the Evil Dead, Army of Darkness movies.
Yeah.
Just that just the way it was the way it was filmed with the really like quick camera actions and the sharp bed sheet wrapping around the leg and things like that. But honestly, it was really well done though. It was for you to be able to make somebody fighting a bed sheet.
Yeah.
Pretty terrifying. I thought it was really good.
Yeah. And again, it was all practical from what I can tell. I mean, I don't think there was really hardly any special effects in this movie. And from a CGI perspective, it all looked very practical to me. But in the second house, and this was the second house where after the hex cloak fails and the satanic cult has reconvened and there's by the way, there is discontent among the powers in the satanic cult. They are arguing and fighting over who's supposed to be in charge and who's failing and who's not, which is its whole other kind of plot point that has some humorous moments. But they have reconvened and they are trying to find where the girls have gone, and they are now trying to basically attack the daughter, Judy, because they have some of her hair. And this was in my opinion, the best scene in terms of story, in terms of actually giving us some real context to the characters and what motivates them, and also some really slick and fun effects, violence, action. It's a couple minutes long, if not more, where the cultists have basically built this voodoo doll of Judy, who is Danica's daughter, and they are using it to inflict various different methods of pain onto her and to kill her. But she knows how to stop it by having Sam write some sort of incantation all over her body with Sharpie. And Sam begins to panic as she's doing this because these weird things are happening to Judy. And in an effort to remain calm, Judy is telling her to tell her story. Tell me about you. Tell me about your life or whatever. And Sam has this really, really good monologue where she basically explains her entire character and who she is and why she does what she does in that moment as she's panicking and the tension is ratcheted up. And, I thought it was really, really, a really beautiful scene, to be honest. I mean, it was a good monologue, and in those couple minutes, you learned who Sam was, and you saw some of the best, I think, effects in the film as well.
Yeah, the effects were really great. And while she was sealing her skin, is what I think was what she called it.
Yes.
While she was telling her, she was telling her story, which was she was a cancer survivor, and her I guess her bedmate or her survivor mate had actually gone through a lot of their treatments together, and she was in remission, and then he actually had to go back into treatment and got sick again, and she could not be there with him. She couldn't stand to be there, and that was haunting her. She felt really bad about that. But the point of that whole part was that it really led you to know why she was helping Judy. Now she wasn't going to leave her new friend. She was going to be there for her, stick by her side. So it was a good. While I thought the story may have been like you're already rooting for her. She's a virgin and she's trying to be killed. And I thought at the time the cancer survivor thing was maybe a little much, but it did lend itself well to, understanding why she was really sticking it out with Judy and helping her.
Well,
she felt like it was her second chance.
It also explained why she was still a virgin, because she said that after that cancer situation with that guy that she truly loved, that she couldn't go back to, she said she couldn't bring herself to love someone else in order to, have sex with somebody else. So it kind of explained, like I said, like you said, and everything about her right there in that one gulp, which I liked, because if they just had left it very open, like, oh, here's a girl who seems innocent, she's a virgin, they're going after her, it would have lacked some depth. So I was glad, even in a movie like this, which again was not meant to be taken serious, they paid attention to the character's story and made you root for them and made you care.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, that was probably my favorite scene of the entire movie, from my perspective.
So shortly after that, they get caught after running through the forest of shadows, forest of whispers. I forget what it was now. It was a creepy forest. So
Forest of Whispers. Again, I like that. That's good.
What's that?
Forest of Whispers. I like that.
I forget what it was, but she called it something, which I thought it was weird because at first this was just a cult that was worshiping Satan, but all of a sudden now there's also some haunted woods, in the back of the neighborhood. It's just weird.
It was totally unexpected. I was actually confused when it started to happen. I was like, "What? The trees are alive? What's happening?" Yeah.
Yep. So now it's so they get caught and they are then chained to a table and beginning the sacrifice. Now let's do a quick little dive into the demon that they were bringing in.
Oh, hold on. We should find some sort of sound effect or intro music in the future when you get ready to go into your demonology explanations, because
maybe we'll get into it.
You did that in, what was
Baphomet.
Baphomet, yes. Okay, please continue.
So he's a deity that the Knights Templar were accused of worshiping, right? So that was incorporated into an occult and mystical traditions way back when. And so the name Baphomet appeared in a trial transcripts for the Inquisition of the Knights of Templar starting in 1307. Now, in 1856, the name Baphomet had been associated with the sabbatic goat, which is where all of the headdress that all of the cult was wearing, that's where all that came from. So it was a sabbatic goat. He was drawn by Elphus Levi. I don't know if that's his first name or not, but so basically it contains like binary elements representing the symbolization of equilibrium, opposites. And so basically it's just, like half human, half animal, male, female, good, evil, on, off, etc. And so really, I think the intention was to symbolize this concept of balance and represents a tradition that should result in a perfect social order. The end.
I cannot believe that you did that much research on a demon for this movie. That is absolutely astonishing. I applaud you in your efforts and preparation for recording this. Because you did the deep dive into the demon from Hereditary, and now you're doing the deep dive into this Satanic Panic demon, who, to be quite frank, I would have just assumed wasn't even a real demon because of this movie. So, wow.
Well, and let's be clear about something. It's not a deep dive. It's probably more like a shallow snorkel, but it was more about just I wanted to know the demon that they were representing in the movie. So, I mean, obviously they had to do some sort of deep dive to it. So
astonishing. We should start a whole separate podcast where you just talk about demons, because you clearly have a knack for it. This scene at the end is where this movie, I mean, it was already a weird movie, but we mentioned it earlier. they have the two girls chained down. They can only sacrifice one because only Sam is the virgin. They are just going to straight up murder Judy, the daughter. They basically have this ceremony where they call forth the demon by, again, they have this, it's an orgy. They're having relations with each other. They're taking their clothes off. There's tons of them. And Jason's right. There was like 9 of them in the beginning, and now there's like 30 people in this yard. And the demon is going to be brought forth and impregnate Sam with his spawn. And that's not going to be good for anybody, especially for her. And 2 things struck me in this scene. First was I was not expecting them to actually succeed. These horror films, at the end of it, you always expect something to happen good. The good guy's going to win, kind of thing. And this movie did have a good ending. But the fact that you saw her actually become with demon spawn child, her belly grow, took me by surprise. I thought she was going to just kind of come away unscathed. The second one was the actual sight of the demon itself. For all of our praising of the fact that this movie's gore and practical effects were very good, when that guy walked through, I didn't actually know it was the demon. I was like, oh, there's a guy in a suit walking like through the yard. Like I thought it looked so unusual.
I don't think that was the demon though. I thought the demon was going to be what was birthed.
Oh, you know what? I think maybe you're right there, but what was that thing?
Because remember Judy's monologue about what they were going to do with her, and at the end of it, they said, the demon was going to walk out of your vagina like a revolving door of ground beef.
Right. That you remember, okay? My, that was graphic. Okay.
It struck me. It stuck with me. But yeah, I'm pretty sure that the demon was going to be birthed from. That's what they needed a virgin for, because it would only work in a virgin womb.
Right. So what was that creature from the Black Lagoon walking through the yard?
I think that was a creature. I think that was a dude with just a really intricate headdress.
But it was like full body. Like it was all kinds of stuff. That's why I was so confused. But anyway, weird. The end of this movie's tone is completely different from the rest of it. It quickly it's like Eyes Wide Shut demon version.
This is where it fell apart for me.
It was really weird. It was strange, and you got to watch it to really understand how it just changes into a really strange vibe. But then, and I really appreciated this. Do you call it a callback? Do you call it a twist with the little girl that we have not talked about at all in this podcast? Like
she shopped at the same store that the twins from The Shining shopped in.
Yes. Creepy dead girls are us. That's where they got their stuff.
Yeah. I mean, they built her up they didn't build her up at all, right? You saw her a few times.
Yeah, there's a young girl that you see
waving.
Yeah, you see this little blonde girl in this white dress a couple times in the very beginning of the film, just kind of playing and waving, and that's it. And you don't think twice of her ever again. And she shows up at the end and basically saves the day in a very strange way, because she is a demon that is more powerful than the demon that they were calling forth.
Apparently, Samazol.
Yes. What was it? Power of the Sams, or?
Well, that was a callback. That was a joke that they paid off on from early on in the movie, but
right.
Because her name was Sam Mazel, and of course, the Samantha played by Haley Griffith, her name was Sam, and the joke is what? Or not a joke, but it's the
Code of the Sams.
Code of the Sams.
Yeah. There again. I mean, from a writing perspective, I really call this movie silly, call it slapstick, call it whatever you want. There were some clever callbacks. There was some clever plotting. With the girl with the power of the Sam, or the Code of the Sam. And there was some cool stuff in this.
There was.
This was a movie that here's the way I felt about this film. We watched the trailer. I watched the trailer first. I thought it was going to be fun. I sent it to you. You were like, hell yeah, let's watch it. So my wife is not a very big fan of horror films. She watches them with me occasionally. She enjoys some kinds. A lot of times she doesn't, not nearly as much as I am a fan of horror. I told her, I said, hey, I got to go watch this movie that Jason and I are doing this week's episode of the podcast on. It's a horror comedy. It's called Satanic Panic. Do you want to watch it with me? And she was like, yeah, sure. 7 minutes into this movie, I was like, this is a mistake. She is going to think I am the biggest like idiot. Like she's looking over me probably right now going, how in the hell do you like this kind of stuff? And when we got to the end of this movie and all this shit started going down, I was like, oh boy, like I don't even want to know what she's going to think of this film when it's over, because I think you have to be a certain kind of person to appreciate what this movie is, if you know what I mean. There's people that are going to like this movie and enjoy it for what it is, and people that are going to watch it and go, what an amazing pile of weirdness, awfulness what that was. I don't ever want to see this again.
Yeah. This is the kind of film that I think would grow, that would be really, it could get its own sort of following, a lot like The Evil Dead and, other. And this isn't a movie that's like so bad that it's good. I mean, it was still a really great movie, but it was done in such a way that it was just so unique and special that it can really get its own following and be just a cult classic going forward.
And that brings up a good point, because I see this in fiction literature a lot, and the same thing applies with film. Horror is such a broad genre. There are so many little subgenres of horror and types of horror from books and then also film. Like, this is a particular type of movie. Like, you have to call it horror, but it's not what the mainstream masses think of as horror, if that makes any sense. It's in its own little category.
Yeah, I would agree. And I think it was a really great movie. Overall, I thought it was really strong up until the end. I wasn't a huge fan of the way it ended. It felt rushed, or for the rest of the movie to be so well thought out. It seemed like the very end of like how they really just wrapped it all up was just an afterthought. And it was just like, okay, well, let's stop it. Let's have this creepy girl that we haven't talked about much. Let's have her come and save the day. We'll give her a tiny little backstory. We won't really make much sense of the way that she fixed everything. We're going to give you your two fuzzy bunnies. You'll just have to watch the movie to pick up on that. And, well, she actually didn't give her both of them, but it was just the way it wrapped up was just so, I don't know. I did not like it. I didn't like the way it ended. I mean, I was glad that she survived and all that, but it was just weird.
They seem to put more effort into the beginning build-up, getting her to the neighborhood, than they did what happened with her after, with any type of closure. But I mean, to be fair, that is also not uncommon with horror films. I mean, if you think about the one that comes instantly to mind, if you think about the original Scream, which, by the way, we should do an episode on in the future, because that is just talk about genre, of its own, and kicking off a movement, kind of like we talked about with the Saw franchise last week. That movie literally ends when everybody is basically killed at the party house. At the end, the sun comes up after they finally kill the killer. The police shows up, and the movie's over. Courtney Cox's character's there, and she's like, "We just witnessed, the bloodbath," and it's over. The camera pulls out, and the movies, you don't see anything about what happened to the characters afterwards. This was almost the same. Like, at least we got some dialogue and some sense that she was going to go on with her life. But I do agree, it felt rushed. I would have rather seen more with her after what happened than all the stuff that they showed before with her at the pizza place making some of those deliveries.
Yeah, I think what would have made the story stronger is if we had some sort of inclination that the little girl was a demon herself.
Right. And
that would have made more sense into what she eventually did. I think probably a little more build up on her would have rounded that ending out a bit.
I'd like to see, I wonder if it's even out there anywhere. I'd like to see the screenplay. You and I both know, even in our, smaller scale efforts of making short films, and we're talking like 1 minute short films. There's a lot of stuff you film and a lot of stuff you write that doesn't make it into the final version. And obviously that is very true for Hollywood and full length features. I'd be curious to know if there was any more with her, or if it was literally just kind of like a set piece that you are definitely introduced to. They make a point to show her in the beginning a couple times, but then she's completely forgotten about till the end, which is not uncommon. I mean, we've seen that in that kind of like, oh yeah, I forgot about that thing or that person. Now it makes complete sense. It works, but yeah, it would have been interesting if she had any more depth to her character in the original screenplay or not.
Yeah. Yeah. I thought about it afterwards. I think it would have been cool for the little girl to have saved her from that sheet demon.
Yeah. Have her pop up just some other random place one time. It would have been cool if she'd have been there with the two kids watching TV in that house, just because that would have kind of made sense too. You know, hey, she's with other kids. That'd have been interesting. Yeah. Anyway, yes, this movie was not exactly what I thought it was going to be. I did think, just based on the trailer, that it was going to have a little more in-your-face humor, but by no means did I not enjoy this movie. I really liked watching it. I would watch it again if the mood struck me somewhere in the future, if I'm looking for something to put on in the background or something. It was good. I really enjoyed it for whatever subgenre of horror you want to slot this. I guess I was just expecting a little more like Tucker and Dale versus Evil, like actually laugh out loud, funny situation kind of thing versus this. But I'm very happy with this film. I'm glad I watched it.
Yeah, I think it towed the line for satire. It was over the top enough to be humorous and lighthearted, but still a good story, and overall a really entertaining film.
Agreed. And I'm looking forward to us going down the rabbit hole of Shudder a little more in the future and watching some more of these smaller indie films. Again, I know I talked to you last year about some of the ones I was watching that I really enjoyed. So now that we're doing this podcast, it'll be nice to have somebody talk about them too. And somebody that will appreciate them the same way. So, all right, man. Anything else you'd like to add this evening?
No, sir.
Well, ladies and gentlemen, this has been episode 5 of the Hallowed Horror Podcast. We talked about Satanic Panic. We appreciate you listening, and if you have listened and enjoy us, if you would like to leave a review or subscribe on whatever podcast platform you prefer, we would greatly appreciate it. And until next time, we'll see you later.
Take care.